بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We continue our study of Hadith 36, which is about the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this chapter, the late Imam Khomeini first refers to the idea of some Muslim philosophers with respect to how classify divine qualities. He mentions something from Mullah Sadra and Haji Sabzawari, who also was following the same line of Mullah Sadra. He was a follower of Al-Hikmatul Muta'aliya, transcendent philosophy. So he first mentions this way of classifying divine attributes, but then he shows that he is not happy completely with this. He has disagreement with this. According to what he calls Hukamaya Ilahi, theosophers, or divine philosophers, those philosophers who believe in God and believe in the major ideas of religion about God. So according to them, Allah's qualities are divided into three. The first category is what they call as-sifatul haqiqiyya. As-sifatul haqiqiyya. And you can understand what does haqiqiyya mean if you understand the second and third category. Haqiqiyya is used in contrast to sifat, which are idafiyya mahdh. They are purely and simply relational. And the third is sifat salbiyya mahdh. They are purely and merely negational. So sifat haqiqiyya means it's not relational and it's not negational. It's about the very reality of God. So perhaps the reason it's called haqiqiyya is because it's about very reality of God. It's not about relations, azafat, or about negating something which is imperfect, so that negation of imperfection becomes affirmation of perfection. No, haqiqiyya is just being concerned about the reality of God. So they say sifat haqiqiyya are divided into two. Sifat haqiqiyya mahdh, sifat haqiqiyya dhat al-idafa. Mahdha means simple. These are the things that you don't need to consider anything other than divine essence. Hayat, the fact that God is alive, that God is eternal. These are the things that you don't need to consider anything other than God himself. But sifat haqiqiyya dhatul idafa are things which are real. It's about God, but to understand, not to exist. We are not talking about existence, because these are in the essence of God. But to understand, in order to make sense, you have to consider something that they belong to. For example, knowledge as a quality which is inside, which is in essence of God, not knowledge as a quality of action. Knowledge is one of the sifat haqiqiyya. But it is not mahdh, it is dhatul idafa, it has relation. Why? Because knowledge always needs ma'loom. So it has to belong to something. Or qudra, power. Power belongs to something. Huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Capable for doing everything. So doing everything or doing certain things is the matter of subject of power. Or irada. will. There is need for will to belong to something. What is murad? There must be something as murad. So they say sifat haqiqiyya of God are divided into mahdha, means simple, pure, and dhatul idafa, relational. Mahdha, like life, like being eternal. Dhatul idafa, relational, like knowledge, like power, like irada. This is the first. So sifat haqiqiyya is the first group. Number two, sifat idafiyya mahdh, purely relational, like mabda'iyya, to be the first, raziqiyya, to be sustainer, rahimiyya, to be merciful, even alimiyya, not alim, alimiyya as something that can be abstracted from considering relation between God and ma'lum, which is there. So when God is there and ma'lum is there, from that, like khaliqiyya, when God is there and creature is there, from that relation we can get the concept of khaliqiyya. Or when God is there and sustenance is given to a sustained being, then we can take the concept of raziqiyya. Or when God is forgiving, for example, things like this. So these are sifat idafiyya mahdh. And finally the third group, sifat salbiyya mahdh, simply negational, like quddusiyat. When we say God is to be glorified with respect to every imperfection, so it is denial and rejection of imperfection. Rejection of something which is negative means to affirm something positive. So when we say God is not imperfect, means God is perfect. Then they say that sifat haqiqiyya, whether they are mahdh or dhatul izafah, are the same as divine essence, and sifat salbiyya and sifat idafiyya mahdh, they are additional to the essence of God. All the sulub, all the negations go back to negating contingency. All the problems that we have starts with our contingency. Because we are mumkin, we are finite, and all other problems are there. All the relations go to one relation, and that is God is mujid, is the originator of the world. And all the relations go back to one relation, and that is what we call idafiyya ishraqiyya. You know, relation normally at least has two sides, A and B. Idafiyya ishraqiyya is that we have A and B, but B is created by A, like Allah and the world. We have the world, but world is created by God himself. He says, I have some difficulty with this idea of Mullah Sadr. He doesn't mention the name of Mullah Sadr, but the same idea of Mullah Sadr. He has difficulty, and he says he believes that all the relational qualities of God go back to rahimiyat wa rahmaniyat dhatiyya. Everything goes back to rahmaniyya and rahimiyya, which are essential. So, and he says, you know, if you are really talking about mafahim, about concepts, these are all different concepts. If you are talking about reality, about haqa'iq beyond mafahim, they all refer to one God, one being. So he doesn't very much accept this way of classification. And then in the next chapter, he talks about the fact that ayniyat awsaf ba dhat muqaddas, the fact that all the qualities of God are identical with his essence. he says this can be discussed in different ways, in different disciplines. They can have different discussions about this. And he says, if we want to have a brief discussion about this, we can say in this way: تمام عین ذات مقدس است. The whole essence of God is sacred. Then there are two levels, two martaba, two stages for qualities. At the stage or level of essence, that, and here we can get the concept of knowledge and power, or qadiriyya and alamiyya. He doesn't accept what some people have said, like Mullah Sadr. He says whether it's a ilm or alamiyya, qudra or qadiriyya, doesn't make difference. And also when it comes to negational ones, he says they are also by implication understood from essence of God. Because Haq Ta'ala Kamal Mutlaq است. Because God the Almighty is absolute perfection. And this absolute perfection is something that you can apply to God. اصل حقیقت اوست. The basis, the origin for all realities is God. And one of the outcomes is that imperfections can be negated from him. So salb is related to perfection, because salb is salb or denial of imperfection. He says then mystics have some terminology here, and they have Fayz Aqdas and Fayz Muqaddas. Fayz Aqdas is the holiest grace of God, and they say this is the origin for essential names, Asma' al-Dhati. And then they have Fayz Muqaddas. Aqdas means the holiest, Muqaddas means the holy. The holy grace, which is the source of qualities of action. So he says, we don't want to go into more details here. He just quickly also refers to a wrong idea that Qazi Sa'id Qummi has mentioned, and that is to say that we cannot understand, we cannot define God's knowledge. We just use the salb. We say God has knowledge means God is not jahil. God has power means God is not incompetent. But we don't accept this, because there is no way to understand one without the other. You don't want to say we don't understand his knowledge. Okay, how did you understand that he is not jahil? If you don't understand one side of tanaquz, one side of opposition, you cannot understand the other one. When there is two contradictory things, A and B, then whether you say A or you say not B, you understand both. So you cannot understand God is not jahil unless you have some idea about ilm of God. So alhamdulillah, these two chapters finish. Then we have a chapter which is very technical and one of the great issues in theology and philosophy, and somehow people have different opinions, and that is about knowledge of God before creation. You know, when God has created us, like now, we exist. God knows us. There's no doubt about this. God knows all the creatures. And if tomorrow new things are created, God knows them. So there is no issue about this. How God knows us, for sure, it's not through mind, through concept, through mental images. He knows us because we are his ma'lul, dependent on him, present for him. Is ilm huzuri. Our presence is known to God through ilm huduri. But The main question is something else. The main question is not now that I am known to God, certainly. Before I was created, did God know about me or not? If he knew about me before creating me, so what was there that he knew? I have not been created. This is called ilm qabla al-ijad. And philosophers explain that God's knowledge prior to creation is not through presence of ma'lumat for him. It's through knowing himself and his essence, and therefore knowing anything that from this essence can be created later. Because we are not separate from God. When God knows his essence perfectly, he knows what this essence is going to bring in certain time, certain space, etc. So he has knowledge in his essence about creatures prior to their creation. And this is actually how he created also them. If he didn't know them, he couldn't create them. So we have a knowledge which is qabla al-ijad. Now the question is, does he know all the details and all the changes or not? Of course he knows all the details, because if he doesn't know the details, then that knowledge is incomplete. He knows all the details. He knows today is raining, or today is shining, etc. Tomorrow, he knows all the details, all the changes. Question: how he knows all these things in his essence without his essence change, without his essence being compound, being divided, etc.? The answer is, he knows all these things in his essence as one knowledge, which has different parts without being partitioned, without being divided. علم إجمالي في عين الكشف التفصيلي. It's one knowledge, but it covers every details. Like, suppose, to make it very simple, like for example, mujtahid who has in his mind, because he's mujtahid, answer for every question you ask him. If you ask him 1,000 questions about wudu, if a million people ask him questions about wudu, he has the answer. But are these answers in a detailed, distinct way there in his mind? Or always he thinking of thousands of answers? No. He has knowledge of fiqh, and that knowledge is belonging to all these questions, without these questions being separately in his mind. So, alhamdulillah, I think we discussed to some part this chapter also. So, the next chapter, which we'll discuss next week, is what is the meaning of sam' and basar for God. The fact that God is hearing and God is watching. What do they mean? Because he doesn't have eyes or ears. So why and how we call him Sami', Basir, etc. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.